Hi, I'm Clay Carlino, and I am live streaming to you from my phone because my computer is still not working exactly the way I want it to. So, today we're going to talk about computers and operating systems and the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, let's do stuff. So, I got a new computer, and the whole purpose of getting that computer was so that I could live stream and do work on videos and talk to you, my adoring audience. Adoring is in air quotes, by the way. And I've been using my laptop for years now, and it was never made for that kind of abuse, and still isn't. So I thought, get a new desktop computer with a dedicated graphics card, do it up right, and have enough system resources to be able to live stream, to edit video fluidly and easily without system lags and without having to wait forever for rendering and stuff like that. But my new computer is not making me happy yet. There's decisions that need to be made when you get a new computer, and of course, one of the big decisions is, do you want a computer that's going to be a Windows computer or a Macintosh computer, or there are other options which people looking at the title of this video will be able to see. So, I'm just going to point out some of the pros and cons of different operating systems. I know this is riveting content, but if you're not a tech geek, and I'm not really a tech geek. I mean, I'm sort of tech-ish. I'm more of a tech fan than a tech geek, but I guess it's kind of a relative thing. Like a true tech geek would say, I don't know anything. But people who really aren't into this stuff would say, oh, yeah, Clay, he knows all sorts of stuff. So I'm somewhere in the middle there. But I made this little spreadsheet, which you can see here using the computer. So you've got Windows and you've got Mac, and the advantage with Windows is that it pretty much lets you do what you want. And people who are Mac fans will probably jump all over me for saying I can do what I want with a Mac. Yes, you do what you want the way they want you to, and you're happy about that because you're a Mac fan. But I'm not a Mac fan, and I don't necessarily want to do things the way they want me to, and so I'm putting a big red X on that one. Lets me use all the software. Yeah, that's Windows. If you are a gamer, then chances are you want Windows because all the games are available on Windows. Most of the software in the world is written for Windows. There's fantastic software. It's good quality software that you can get for a Mac, but your choice is severely limited. Only does what I want it to. Well, this is where Windows always ticks me off. I get so angry using Windows because it does all sorts of stuff that I don't tell it to. And that goes down to the last one, which is doesn't bog down my system. Yeah, Windows will take a brand new computer with top of the line specs and make it run like a slug. So if you want performance out of your computer, Windows is really not the best way to go. Going back to only does what I want it to on Mac, I don't really know. I don't use Mac on a regular basis, and my impression is that it's much better about not doing a whole bunch of stuff that you don't want it to, but I can't really speak from experience on that. Is cheap. Now, I'm going to put a check mark in the Windows column for it's cheap because pretty much every computer that you buy that's not a Mac comes with Windows already installed, and it's a legal copy. So it's essentially free. It's not really free, but since you usually don't get a choice, you end up with it anyway, then I'm going to say it's cheap, whereas you pay a lot of money for a Mac. They are not cheap computers, and people who are Mac fans, and I think that it's valid, will say, well, it's worth it because a Macintosh is a very high quality machine, which it is, and the software is very well engineered. But is it cheap? No. And of course, going back to the doesn't bog down my system, Windows, no, 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 no. Windows will bog down your system, and Macs run very, very well. But it are those the only options? And that's where we come into the third category, which is Linux. Linux lets me do whatever I want it to. You cannot get all the software on Linux. You are very limited in what software is available for Linux, unless you're going to use emulators or virtual windows or things that simulate a Windows environment. But out of the box, no, you do not get all the software in the world. But it only does what I want it to. It's cheap because it's free to download. At least most distributions of Linux are free to download. And it doesn't bog down my system. In fact, this is a huge one for Linux. My laptop was not a new model laptop when I bought it about 3 years ago. And it was a refurbished laptop that I bought online. It was already an older model, and I put Ubuntu 16.04 on it, and it ran better than my work computer, which has better system specs, but has Windows. So that's some of the reasons that a person would choose to use Linux as opposed to Windows or Macintosh. Because look at that. I mean, that's a lot of green check marks. And so, yeah, these are, now there are, of course, other considerations, and it depends on what's important to you. But as someone who's not using the computer for the love of computing, but rather to get things done, these things are important to me. And so that is why I'm a Linux user. So so this is my new computer, and it's kind of spiffy looking. It has, like, pretty lights and things, and glass front. It's a very spiffy looking computer. The keyboard looks like something from the set of the original Star Wars movies. So I call it Darth Ubuntu, because I've installed Ubuntu 19.04 on this system. It's not actually a super expensive system, and if you actually got to use this keyboard, you would feel that it actually feels pretty cheap. It's light, and it feels like the plastic is thin. It's not a mechanical keyboard, but it's got a lot of angles and lights and some red keys, and that makes it look very spiffy. So this is Ubuntu 19.10, and to help people who are not in the know about Ubuntu or other Linux distributions, here's a little background information. So every year, Ubuntu, which is a distribution of Linux, okay? Now, there's tons of different distributions of Linux. Linux is not a single OS, in the same way that over the years, there have been many different versions of Windows. there are many, many different versions of Linux, except even more so because, with Windows, you'll get the official version. And, back in the day, there was Windows 95, and then at the same time, there was Windows NT, or like NT came later, and then there was ME, and then there was the one that everybody used for many, many years, even after it wasn't relevant anymore. Windows XP. Everybody loved Windows XP because it worked. It just worked. And so people hung on to it. And then there was Windows Vista, and then Windows 7, which people tended to like, and then Windows 8, which people didn't like, and then Windows 10, which seems to be what everybody's stuck with. And I kind of feel like the world has given up. We've gotten in bed with Windows 10, and we know when we get up in the morning and it has bad breath that we're just going to be married to it for the rest of our lives. Um, yeah, it's a little bit sad, but that's Windows 10. Um, and it's cranky, and it keeps doing stuff without you wanting it to, and wrecking your car. Yeah, Windows 10. It's a terrible thing. So, um, uh, that now I just like to say that I am married to Linux. Linux is waking up in the morning with a beautiful wife who loves you and kisses you and treats you like $1 million, and you get to hold her at night and gaze lovingly into her beautiful eyes at dinner, and be elated. So yeah, that's my Linux wife. Is that better, sweetie? Maybe, I don't know. Uh, so anyway, in Ubuntu is just one flavor of Linux. There's Linux Mint. Actually, I'm not going to go into all the different ones. I've played with Elementor OS, which is another flavor. Thank you, sweetie. That's based off of, I believe, Ubuntu 16.04. There's paid versions of Linux. There's just a ton. But probably the most well-known version of Linux, at least in general, is Ubuntu. And Ubuntu has worked very hard over the years to create a desktop system where, if you're used to using your Windows or Mac computer and you sit down on an Ubuntu computer, chances are it won't feel that much different. Especially if you're just doing normal stuff like checking the internet or using an office suite or something like that. The differences, at least they're cosmetic, and that's one of the nice things about Ubuntu, is that they've gone out of their way to make it relatively easy. And that's been my experience. As I stated before, I have Ubuntu on my laptop. I had an earlier version of Ubuntu on my laptop before then, and the laptop before then, and I would install it. And over the last several versions, I would install it, and everything would just work. It was great. You download an image for a live USB, just like one of these. You use the Startup Disk Creator, which there's a program on Linux called Startup Disk Creator. There's also things on Windows and Mac that let you make a bootable USB drive, and then you just essentially burn that image onto a thumb drive. Lately, computers, you'll have to go into the BIOS and you will have to tell it to boot from a USB drive because mostly because Windows and the companies that manufacture computers with Windows on it don't want you to do this. So they've started putting protections into the BIOS to try and prevent you from doing it. So you have to go into the BIOS, which actually isn't as hard as it sounds. It's a matter of hitting either F1 or delete while it's first booting up, and then it brings up the BIOS screen, and then you just change the boot order with it to include your USB drive. Save and exit with the USB drive in there, and oh look, Wesley wants to be a Linux user. Hi, Wesley. Do you want to be on the internet? He wants to be on the internet. That microphone isn't doing anything right now. So, so anyway, you would put the USB drive into your computer and then let it boot. And then it's running Linux at that point. It's running a live version of the OS right from the thumb drive without changing anything to your hard drive. So you can actually experiment and play with Linux without actually changing your system. It's great. If you're a little bit hesitant, you don't necessarily want to change your system over, then this is a great way to play with it and get familiar with it without actually having to risk anything. Now, here's the thing. There is a thing when this comes up that says install Ubuntu. If you click that, then it's going to install Ubuntu. And if you haven't done things to protect your system, like making extra partitions and stuff like that, then you can overwrite Windows. I'm letting you know now. So anybody who tries this and then accidentally erases Windows off of their computer, I did tell you. I did tell you that that can happen. Now, for me, my last several computers, I have gleefully erased Windows. I have intentionally erased Windows because I freaking hate Windows. It just, everything it does makes me mad. It does stuff and it just keeps doing stuff, and then your computer sits there and looks at you and you're trying to turn it on or turn it off, but it doesn't turn on or turn off because it's doing stuff, and you're like, what are you doing? I didn't tell you to do anything. But it's like, no, I'm doing important stuff. So anyway, I digress. This is Ubuntu. This is Cat Ubuntu. Cat butt 2, because that's my cat's butt. Wesley, are you gonna? Oh, okay. Are you getting back on my lap? Yes. Thigh pick. Yes, this is a thigh pick. Here we go, internet. I have given you a thigh pick. Sweet kitty. Yeah, look at that. Oh. All right, so Wesley is parking himself on my lap, and I'm going to try to talk about Linux a little bit. So, take 4, trying to talk about this operating system. This is Ubuntu 19.10, and the way that it works is every couple years, Ubuntu will release a long-term service version of Ubuntu. So there was a long-term service version in 2018, and it's always in April. Is it April? Let's see, January, February, March, April. Yes, April. And so the numbers in an Ubuntu distribution correspond to the year, then the month. So in 2018, in April, they released Ubuntu 18.04. And then the long-term service version before that is the one that's on my laptop currently, 16.04. And then 2 years before that was Ubuntu 14.04. But here's the thing, every 6 months, they create a new version that has some updates and some a little bit more experimental features. And so then you have things like 1910, which was released in 2019 in October. And then the next long-term service version is 20.04. And I decided to go with 1910 rather than 18.04 because I'm probably going to transition to 2004 when it comes out in another 4 months. So just getting a look at this, you've got applications. These are all of the favorites. And if you want things that you haven't put on your favorites bar, you can just click down here and it has all your applications. And I could search, if I needed to find Chrome, even though it's right there, I can start typing into this window and look, Chrome's right there. I can exit out of that and exit out here. And then that takes me to this, this is the activities bar, which shows all the different things that I have open right now. I also have multiple desktops, so I can click a different desktop here, and then it just goes to that, and then I don't have anything on my screen. But I want to go to the one on my screen, so I can click over there. That has my Hangouts window, and I have other things. So like I have a terminal window open because when you're using Ubuntu, everything that you do to install software or to make changes, you're going to do in the terminal window. That's different from Windows where everything's point and click, but it's actually usually not that bad. You go to a forum and you just copy instructions, paste them in, and go, and I'd say at least 80% of the time it just does everything that you need it to. And if you're not doing advanced computing, then you may never even touch this. It's only when you're doing specialized stuff. So I've got my my spreadsheet that I made that has all this valuable information. This is using Libre Office, which is an open source office suite that does everything that Microsoft Office does, except it's free. And you can get LibreOffice for any computer. You can get it for Windows or Mac or Linux, and it works extremely well. So then I have my notepad here, which has the different system specs for this computer. So you see, it's all the same stuff that you're familiar with. It's just point and click and do. But now I'm going to tell you the ugly. As evidenced by the fact that I'm live streaming from my phone and not from my fancy new computer that has a dedicated video card. It's still not doing everything exactly right. And I'm not sure exactly what the source of the problem is. Is it that the that Ubuntu 19.10 is only 2 months old, and I know that that's one of the issues because when I have a Radeon graphics card on this. When I go to the Radeon website, the drivers that they have available for my graphics card are written for Ubuntu 18.04. I don't see any listed for 1910. That might be one of my problems. And with that being a problem, my OBS software, which is Open Broadcasting Studio, which is what I've used in the past to live stream. It lets me put in different cameras and put in my nice Yeti microphone. Thank you, Mr. Fillion, for letting me use the Yeti microphone because it really does make a tremendous difference. Um, that that program is not acknowledging the existence of my graphics card. And that might be due to the drivers not being up to date or not working with this version of Ubuntu. So that's that gets me to my review of 1910. Ubuntu 19.10, and please understand that I am a person that loves Linux. I've been using it for years. I appreciate that Linux exists because the other options suck. I'm not going to buy a Mac. I refuse to buy a Mac. I just they have high quality hardware and high quality software, but one of the ways that they maintain that quality is by not letting you do whatever you want with your system. And that works. I mean, they hold the line on it, and they make sure that you are not going to do anything that's going to break their hardware. But the philosophy that I've always gotten from Apple is that when you're using an Apple product, it's not yours, it's still theirs. You're just paying them a lot of money to get to use their product. But as far as they're concerned, it still belongs to them. And that ain't me. I mean, I void warranties. I take stuff apart. I have security screwdrivers specifically made to take out security screws. I don't want a system that has handcuffs all over it. So I am never going to be a Mac user. It's just not me. Windows ticks me off constantly. I mean, every time I have to use it, somebody's got a nice engine. There they go. The one on the charger is still nicer. But, Windows just ticks me off for all the reasons that I've already told you about. And when I was a kid, I loved computers. I had my Commodore 64 and my Amiga 500, and I would spend hours and hours programming those things and having a great time doing it. And then when the world turned to Windows, computers just became boring. And I just lost interest, and I didn't find that enjoyment again until I discovered Linux. So as a Linux person, as somebody that appreciates Linux and is willing to deal with some of the hiccups, I have to say, kind of disappointed with Ubuntu 19.10. It's functional. It looks nice. I'm getting used to the interface. It has changed a bit since 1604. But the fact that I'm having to fight so hard to get it to use the graphics card. And I know it's only 2 months old. And it's not a long-term service version. So perhaps what I should have done is just installed 18.04. And maybe that's what I'm going to end up doing. That might be the solution to my problems, is just go back to the long-term service version from a year and a half ago, install that, and then ideally the drivers work, the software works, and everything works. But this one has just been causing me headaches. And I don't know if that's because it's a new version or because it's one of the interim versions. But my phone is ringing. And I'm going to tell it. Oh, it's my... Okay, well. It's my mechanic telling me that the inspection is done on Diablo. So I'm going to wrap this up because I want to get my car back. But yeah, I don't know whether my problems are because I'm using a short-term service version or because it's a brand new version or if it's some other thing. But right now, I'm just not very happy with Ubuntu 19.10. And I hate to say that because I'm a big fan, but no, Curtis. I'm not going to buy Apple. I believe I spent a good 5 minutes explaining why Apple is crap. So I'll roll that back just a little bit. Apple's not crap. If you want to pay way, way, way too much for somebody else to tell you how to use your computer, then go ahead, buy Apple. Thank you, Curtis. And thank you for joining on. I'm glad to see you. And happy holidays, by the way. You know, it's true. Curtis does love to get me to spout off about Apple because Happy New Year. And I hope you had a Merry Christmas. I'll see you soon. And you'll get to see Diablo. So, yeah, I'm really not an Apple fan. Not at all. But I respect the engineering behind Apple. I will give them credit where it's due. I respect Apple for what it accomplishes. I just really have no desire to be in that community. All right, so that's it. A little bit of a harsh review of Ubuntu 19.10 because stuff just doesn't work right out of the box the way that I've had with other computers. Maybe it's because this is the first computer that I've had that's had a dedicated graphics card. Maybe. And if that's the case, then Ubuntu guys, I'm hoping that you're working on this stuff. But certainly, at least out of the box, Ubuntu 10 or 19.10 is not quite there. So if I change to a different operating system, I'll let everybody know. When I fix whatever the problems are, I will certainly post a video about it. Other than that, have a happy new year from me and Wesley. Say happy new year, Wesley. He doesn't talk. He's just a cat. So, happy new year. And thank you for watching.